Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I greet you once, I greet you twice, and thrice I greet you. Ke te mihi hau ki te kaihanga. Me mihi hau ki ngā koutou ātua. Our first greeting always goes to the Creator, and then to the gods, whichever ones it may be that you believe in, we acknowledge your presence. Me mihi hau ki a Papatuanuku. Me mihi hau ki a Rangi Nui. We acknowledge always the presence of the Earth Mother and the Sky Father watching over us. Kina mate, haere, haere, haere atu rā. Te hunga mate, ki te hunga mate. Te hunga ora, ki te hunga ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. To the dead, to those who have passed beyond the veil, we acknowledge your presence. And to the living, to those of us who still draw life's breath, I acknowledge you. Join the dead to the dead, and join the living to the living. And let it be so. Ke te mihi au ki ngā koutou maunga o tēnei roki. Me mihi au ki ngā koutou awa ki ngā koutou moana o tēnei roki. It is right that I acknowledge all the mountains of this region. It is correct that I acknowledge all the rivers and the lakes and the seas of this region. Ke te mihi au tēnei rā ki te whare e tūnei. Me ki te wananga I waho. It is correct to acknowledge the house that stands here today and the learning campus on which we are hosted. Ki ngā koutou tangata whenua o tēnei roki me mea hau, ki ngā koutou mana whenua o tēnei roki. To the indigenous peoples of this land, to the ancestral people of this land, ke te mihi hau ki a koutou, it is right that I acknowledge you. Me ki a koutou katoa, ki a koutou ngā iwi, ki ngā hoe whāna iwi e tūnei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. And to all the people of this land today, and to all the people of the four winds that are gathered here today, I acknowledge you. Ki te mihi hau tēnei rā ki a koe Ethan, me ki te kapa o GYA, Gap Year Association, ka nui te mai o hamo o koutou tōtoko, ka nui te mai o hamo o koutou manaakitanga o tēnei hui tēnei rā. It is only correct and right that I should acknowledge Ethan and the whole of the team of the Gap Year Association. Great is our appreciation for both your support and your hospitality of our meetings here today and of our meetings here this week. Nō reira, ki a koutou katoa, ki ngā hoe whāna iwi e tūnei, to all the four peoples, all the peoples of the four winds gathered here today, I say to you, tuhia ki te rangi, tuhia ki te whenua, tuhia ki ngā ko, ngā tangata, write it in the sky, write it in the land, and write it in the heart of the people. Ko te me nui, ko te aroha. What is the most important thing we must remember? The most important thing is love. Nō reira, kia ora koutou. My name's Mark and I have the pleasure of coming all the way from Aotearoa, New Zealand to talk to you here today. From Te Tawiwa Te Wakawa Maui, the prow of Maori's canoe, which represents the top of the South Island. To come to you to tell you a story today, the story of Brad. Brad is an American citizen. Brad is 20 years old. Brad travelled to New Zealand last year as part of a program under the auspices, under the umbrella of the Carpe Diem program. And nā mihi nui ki a koe James, who I believe in the room. Greetings to James, who coordinated that program. Brad travels to New Zealand with 12 other young American people to learn a little bit more about himself, to discover a little bit more about himself. Now Brad is a big, strong guy. Brad is a football player. He's athletic. He's good looking, he's jovial, he's popular, he's got a lot going for him. He's perhaps a little bit overly confident. And although we don't have the word or vernacular in New Zealand, Carl rightly assures me that the correct word to say is Carl's a bit of a jock. And Carl's a bit of a jock from the United States. He's come to learn about things in New Zealand. And Carl disappears with us, with our two facilitators, on a 12-day environmental wilderness cultural journey to learn a little bit more about life in New Zealand. And our facilitators incredibly skillfully weave some lessons that we've learned from our indigenous past, from Te Ao Māori, from the world of the Māori, to design together a program that will allow us to work with our young students from America through the lens of an indigenous culture, to be able to get them to reflect on who they are and where they're from. And the particular model we used to do this with Brad and his team is called Te Whare Tapawhā, the house of four sides, or the house of four pillars. And I want you to imagine a traditional ancestral house the Whanenui on any marae or Māori meeting place in New Zealand. And the Whanenui must be strong. There must be the 4 pillars to uphold the roof. If those 4 pillars are not there, then there may be some problems. There may be gaps in the roof. And when there's gaps in the roof, then the cold rain can come in to dampen our horizons. The wintry winds can funnel in through to skitter across our cold souls. Or even worse, the thunder can come through to penetrate and shake our very convictions. So we use the house as a metaphor for ourselves. And Te Whare Tapawha is a model of order, or of well-being and of health. And each one of these 4 pillars must be strong for us as human beings to be strong and be healthy as we navigate the pathways of our lives. And as I talk about the model today, I encourage you to reflect it onto yourselves. But we use Brad as our metaphor, we use Brad as our example. As we're walking through day 2 and day 3 of our program, we're climbing mountains, we're camping out under the stars, we're walking along the beautiful beaches you see here, and Brad is doing well. Our instructors talk about the first pillar. The first pillar is about our physical health. This is the one we relate to most in the Western world. Brad doesn't have to worry. He's been training for 18 years of his life, he's in peak physical condition, he's never had any physical problems. Brad is strong. Brad doesn't have to worry about this at all. And as we continue to work on our journey through days 3, 4, 5, our instructors will start to talk more and more about the second pillar, one that we do relate to more in the Western world now. And this, translated from Māori, is the health of the mind. I think we would call that mental health in the words of today. It's an area which Brad has never really had to worry about. He's been surrounded by love, he's always felt confident, he hasn't had any mental health troubles. But there's others in the group that have. And through reflecting on their experiences, Brad can realise that actually this is equally important. His physical health, he needs to think more about his mental health. And then as we journey through day 7 and 8 of the program, our instructors start to talk a little bit more about something which is perhaps forgotten in some of our Western societies, and the Māori term for that is whānau-onutanga. Whānau-onutanga is the connections, your social connections that weave up the social tapestry of your life. The power of those connections coming down from your ancestors, down through your family, into your children and below. And even just as important, the horizontal tapestries that weave out into your friendships and into your community, into your cousins and into your friends from college. And the Māori interpretation is for a person to be healthy, that tapestry must be strong. Unfortunately, for many of us in the Western world, in an increasingly digitally connected world, our social tapestries are fraying apart. And for Brad, as he reflects on this, he thinks his parents divorced when he was 12. He hasn't really thought about that much. He's got a good relationship with his mum, good relationship with his dad. Doesn't have any siblings. His rock, his solid rock as he's grown up through his life has been his football team and the coach. And all his peers who's come up through his football team until he gets to 18. And then now all dispersed across the different colleges and different universities across the states. And as Brad reflects on this in the wilderness, sitting around the campfire, he starts to feel a little alone. He starts to feel perhaps he needs to work a little bit stronger on making some more connections, on reconnecting those tapestries. And then we continue on our journeys through the Abel Tasman National Park, and sitting out on the beach in the Abel Tasman National Park one night, our instructors facilitate with the group the final pillar that we need to keep our house strong. And this is one that we seem to have entirely forgotten about in many of our Western cultures. This is a concept that is integral to our health, the concept of spirituality. And don't mistake me for talking about religion. I'm not talking about God. I'm talking about Te Ao Māori, the world of Māori, a spiritual, almost visceral connection to the land that we stand on. Connection to our rivers and to our seas and to our stars. It's a connection that young Māori feel. It's a connection that we should all feel, in my opinion. And yet for Brad, this is totally alien to him. This is something he wasn't brought up in a religious way, he wasn't brought up in a spiritual way. But when he reflects back on his journey over the last 12 days, as he sits on the beach, as he really thinks back on it, he has been most at peace, he realizes, when he's been sitting next to a river, in the silence, absorbing the natural environments around him. When he's been watching the mountain parrots flying through the alpine areas, and just spending some time out connecting with nature. So those are the 4 pillars that form up Te Whare Tapawha. And as Brad leaves us after his 12 days with us, he leaves us, to be fair, less confident than he was when he came in. We've shaken Brad a little bit. but Brad leaves us profoundly changed and profoundly better prepared to navigate the pathway of his life. For he knows as he walks along that pathway now, whatever comes at him, whatever slings and arrows of outrageous fortune we throw at Brad, he can pause, and he has a toolkit. He can think, oh, I'm feeling a little bit out of sorts here. Something's not quite wrong, not quite right. Let's think back to our fight. What's going on? Is it relationships? Is it my mental health? Is it my physical health? Let me pause. Do I need to reconnect spiritually with what feeds my spirit? And in understanding that, Brad leaves us infinitely more stronger, even if perhaps a little bit less confident in himself. So our message today from the story of today is every one of us lives in a place where there are indigenous people who are infinitely more connected to the land and to relationships across the community than we are today, however civilized we may feel we are. There are lessons from our indigenous past that we can look through. We can use them as a lens to examine our society today. And for those of you involved in teaching in the experiential learning environment and you really want to connect with young people, it's a story that fascinates our young people coming through as an incredibly effective teaching and self-development mechanism. So I'd just like to leave you today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, but with some more words that come from Te Ao Māori. We have what they're called whakatauki, they're called proverbs, which are often used within Māori. And this particular one guides all of our work, guides my work, guides all of our team's work in the work we do in New Zealand. The words say, ko te apure o te tamaiti arahia o tātou mahi. Let the uniqueness of the child guide all of our work. Nō reira, kia koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you.